All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the ASP.NET Community Standup, where we discuss the latest updates to .NET web development. I'm Daniel Roth. I'm the Principal Product Manager for ASP.NET Core on the .NET team. And today I've got two very special guests. I'm, of course, joined by Javier Calvarro Nelson. Javier, do you want to say hello? Hello, Javier. Can you hear us? I think he's are you frozen? I don't think he can hear us. Well, hopefully we'll get Javier back on. But Javier is our principal software engineer on the Blazor engineering team. And then, of course, we have our very special guest, Roland Vizner, our Blazor intern. Welcome, Roland.
Thanks a lot, Dan, for the introduction. I'm very excited to be here. And yeah, let's get this party started.
Let's get it started. Now, today is actually a special day for a couple of reasons. Of course, today is our Blazor Internship Demo Fest, where we get to see the things that Roland has been working on all summer long, at least summer in the Western Hemisphere. So that's going to be pretty cool. We've got Javier back. Let's see if we can hear him now. Javier, can you hear us?
Yes.
little technical glitch there. Welcome, Javier. It's great to have you back.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back too.
So exciting day for a number of reasons. First of all, of course, it's the second Tuesday of the month, which means we're going to be talking about all things Blazor in this community stand-up. And it's the Blazor Internship Demo Fest. We have Roland here to show what he's been working on. Javier, I hear you're also going to be, as a sort of honorary intern, you're going to be showing us some stuff as well?
Exactly. I'm former intern, so I can still be an intern.
Former intern at Microsoft. That's how long ago was that, Javier? Or do you not want to say?
Longer than I'm comfortable sharing.
That's great. But also, today is a very special release day. For those of you who have been following along with us, you know that we've been hard at work on .NET 10. We've shipped, 7 preview releases so far, and we have been hard at work at the next, the first release candidate for .NET 10, where we are feature complete, where we think that this is the build that we can ship for the final stable release this coming November. So release candidate 1 should be dropping momentarily. Like I've been, mashing the F5 button on the .NET website to see if it showed up yet. Let me check it right now. Is it there? Downloads. Or is it still showing? Yeah, still showing preview 7. Not quite there yet, but keep an eye out. Hopefully sometime within the next hour-ish or so, .NET 10 release candidate 1 will be showing up. Now, this is because it's a release candidate, it does have a go live license. That means you are welcome to use it in in production environment. And we encourage you to do so, to take your .NET 9 apps or even your .NET 8 apps if you've been doing long-term support release upgrades following the LTS trains. .NET 10 is an LTS release. Try upgrading your apps to the latest .NET 10 RC1 release. Let us know how it goes. File issues on GitHub. There is still some time for us to make some adjustments to .NET 10. So as we get that feedback in, we'll do some, last round of bug fixing. We do have one more release candidate planned in October, and then the final GA stable release in November at our the biggest .NET event of the year at .NET Conf. So mark your calendars for that. We're getting pretty close to the end of the .NET 10 release wave. So look for .NET 10 RC1 coming out, hopefully, momentarily. All right? Okay, with that, let's talk about what our intern has been working on. Roland, first of all, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? So first, where are you coming from?
Of course. So my name is Roland. I'm from Slovakia originally. I'm doing my Bachelor of Computer Science at TU Delft. Right now, I'm going into my 3rd year, and I had the amazing opportunity to join the Blazor WebAssembly team in MDC Prague this summer. And so what I've been working on is how to deal with dynamic images in Blazor. So imagine you have a situation where you want to display images that are not static assets. They are coming from a dynamic source, such as an API, a database, etc. And you want to display these images efficiently. Currently, there is not an easy and efficient way to do this. The most popular approach is to use base64 encoding, encode the image data into base64, which, by the way, increases the size of the image by 33%. So for example, a 6 megabyte image turns into 8 megabytes of memory allocated on the dotnet side, which at scale can cause huge performance issues. So the goal of my project was to use a easy to use and efficient component for Blazor developers to implement into their apps and not have to struggle with the things they had to struggle with up until now. So
dynamic image loading with a pre-built image component in Blazor. I think, and I know we've had this item on our backlog, I think, for a little while, right, Javier? Like it's I think you may have even been the one that opened the original issue. So this is something we've really wanted to do. We were just waiting for the right person to come and implement this feature, and Roland is here. And yeah, excited to see what this looks like. Do you want to show some code at this point? Do you want me to pop your screen up?
I think I'll first go over the idea of the component, and then I'll cover how it looks inside of the code and how it actually works with a simple demo. So the idea of the component is using JS interrupt and its efficient streaming capabilities to get the image data into the browser's JavaScript, and they're making into a blob and a blob URL to display. So basically what the component does, it receives a image source, in which you provide the image's data either in a form of a byte array or a stream. This data gets taken by the component. The component sends a stream reference of this data using JS interrupt to the browser's JavaScript, where this data is processed. On the JavaScript side, it also utilizes a cache API, which basically is an efficient way to deal with the same images multiple times. So when an image display request comes in, the cache is first checked if this image was already processed. If yes, then there's no need to process the stream reference. And if not, the data will get cached and stored for the next instances.
There's some good excitement on the chat, people, about this component idea. Sounds like there's some demand, and I think that's reflected on the GitHub issue as well. I know we had quite a few thumbs up reactions on the original post, which is one of the signals that we use to gauge how interested people are in these various features. Okay, so this in order to make the transfer of the image data efficient, we're going to be leveraging Blazor's JavaScript interrupt functionality, which allows you to basically send raw bytes across the interrupt channel, and then those will get processed on the client side and as a blob URL. Can you tell us a little bit about how blob URLs work? Like, is that basically a way to just point to some bytes that are stored somewhere in the browser and then display them as an image?
Yep. So short answer, yes.
Cool. So you don't have to then base64 encode that data. You can just like reference raw bytes and get them to.
Exactly. You call an API and it gives you back a string.
Perfect. That sounds great.
So why don't we get into the code?
Let's do it.
Oh wait, my dev box closed.
Uh-oh.
Oh.
Damn, quickly, the elevator music.
Let's check to see if RC1's out yet. That's always exciting. Hit my F5 button over and over again. Is it out? Is it out?
Yes, so maybe while Roland figures out the machine stuff, we can talk about a bit why like this came to be. And yeah, it essentially when we were in the initial versions of like Blazor, we had like a non-trivial amount of people that would just like grab a very big string from things like Graph API and things like that, and will just create a blob out of that image, and that essentially is like a big string that remains in memory for the entire life of your like app. And if you do that for every user, then it's a a good way and quick way of like trashing your memory. So the challenge with all these things is that, well, it's very easy to base 64 and code something. There is a method in the framework that does it for you. So people would just do that. And it works really well when you're in development. But like when you go to production is when you find the like hard truth. So it becomes a bit of failure. And we wanted to like think that like, hey, if we give people an easier option where they don't even have to like even base 64 and code stuff, we are setting them up for success.
Cool. Roland, I can see your I think your dev box is back up. Are you ready to show?
Yeah. I am. Let's get into it.
Let's bring the code up. Looks great.
Okay. Am I live? Let's go.
Yep. We can see your
Nice.
code. We see the AI image demo.razor.
That's amazing. Okay, so from the point of view of the developers, all of that they have to do is use this image component that takes an extra attribute contrary to the classic image attribute that is a source. And this source is basically just a wrapper that takes in either a byte array or a stream, the MIME type of the image, and a cache key, which is here just randomly generated. But normally users would get this from some kind of metadata of the image. So that's basically all there is to the usage. You can still use all of the classic HTML image attributes, and the source is just an additional thing that you put in. So let's see what this code actually does. This is a very simple image generation application that is connected to a image generation API, which is the dynamic source of choice in our case. So let's just do something like a cat with a red hat. And so now the image is being generated. We will receive a byte array from the image generation in this data variable that will get passed to the component and displayed in the browser. Nice cat we have. Yeah. Maybe some things I could cover moreover about the component that we have not talked about yet. There's this progress variable that we basically give from the JavaScript to the CSS so that when you want to make custom loading animations for your images, for very large images, you can directly access this image loading variable that basically tells you what percentage of the way the image is loaded into memory, and use this for some kind of fancy loading animation.
Like a progress bar or spinning donut type thing if you're
exactly
loading a large image from a database of that sort. Okay. Yeah.
Or if you're loading 1,000 of them.
Huh. Makes sense.
Okay, so that's basically it for my demo. Now I guess
it's so simple, Roland.
It's so simple. It's not that simple under the hood, but it's very simple to use.
Yeah, tell us a little about
that's what we want.
The under the hood piece, like how. What was it like to actually implement this? And can you tell us a little bit about the design?
Yeah, of course. So it was an exciting experience. At paper, at first, it seemed very simple, like just display some bytes, but it proved to be a pretty challenging and long while process of implementation, where first I made some proof of concepts. This was enabled by GitHub Copilot to do this quickly. I could like bump up a lot of proof of concepts to see what the idea is, what the structure might look like. And after the proof of concepts kind of worked, we got into the stage of actually thinking about the implications of performance, caching. There were a lot of changes along the way to the way we cache, to the way we transferred the bytes, finding better and better approaches, thanks to discussion with colleagues, of course. Javier was my main and massive help with making this component at all, but making it efficient and guiding me through the process. So big thanks to Javier, big thanks to my team. Yeah, and important thing, I didn't mention an important part on what was actually worked on, because this efficient idea of transferring something over JS interrupt cannot be applied only to images. And the same approach I also applied to video and file download. So there are also video and file download components coming that utilize the same efficient performance for showing video or downloading files.
So it's basically becomes then like a generic mechanism for you want to load some media that's of large size, and you want to do that efficiently over with just raw bytes as opposed to having to encode things and be able to display them. And so it becomes a generic mechanism, not just for images, but then potentially also for audio, video style media.
True. Yeah, there are minor differences. For example, when it comes to video, there are some tricks how to not consume all of the chunks in memory, such as by using a media source API, but the general idea is the same.
Very cool. Okay, that sounds good. So that's something you're currently working on then. Like that's not something that's done yet, but something you guys are experimenting with, expanding the image component to also support those scenarios.
Yes. This is currently in production. The PR is open, and hopefully we'll get it merged soon.
So if someone wants to try out the image component that you've already built, like what is the state of that? Is it still sitting in PR? Is it in a fork on your branch? What's the state of the image component currently?
It is merged into main, but the discussion of when it'll be actually released is up for discussion, whether it'll be the next .NET or in term of a package.
Awesome. So you merged, like it's in.
Yes, it's
in .NET ASP.NET Core. That's amazing. Congratulations on getting your PR into the ASP.NET Core repo. That's a big accomplishment.
Thank you. We got more than one PR.
More than one. This to be clear, like this in main, but that doesn't mean it's in .NET 10 yet, right? Like we're kind of, as we were talking earlier, we're kind of late in the .NET 10 release right now. We just cut the first release candidate, which means we're effectively feature complete. So the plan of record right now, I believe, is that this won't be in .NET 10. Don't hate us, folks. Like it's probably not going to make it in the .NET 10 release. But it is in the repo, which means it is now presumably part of the like the nightly builds. They're the public builds that are available for the main branches. So if you want to go grab a build of .NET from the I think it's not the .NET SDK repo now is where you can find those. You could pull down one of those builds and give us a try yourself.
Yeah.
Cool. So that's one option. And then as we get into .NET 11 planning and .NET 11 releases, this would then just show up in those initial previews for people to actually get a chance to try out with the next release wave as we start working on that. Like we're closing down .NET 10 now and starting to ramp up the .NET 11 effort. So you may start to see us, doing planning exercises and on GitHub, talking about next the roadmap for the next release, priorities for the next release, and so forth. Still got to finish up .NET 10. We're not done there yet, but we're starting that transition. Awesome. Well, Roland, fantastic internship project. I know there were people certainly that were excited about that in the chat to finally have a built-in image component. So hopefully that will be available in the .NET platform soon for people to use. And yeah, great stuff. What's next for you? Like, where do you go now that you're finishing up your internship at Microsoft? What's the future hold? Back to school?
Yeah, that's right. First of all, I would like just to thank again to all of you guys for this opportunity. It was extremely fun to work on this. I've learned so much. So this summer was just amazing. But yeah, it is true. My school did start last week. So right after my internship ends, I will go back to uni, back to studying, and maybe one day return back.
Maybe come back. We've had that
Oh,
happen.
we would love that. Yes.
There was a question from one of our watchers about how many years of .NET experience did you have before you started this project? Had you coded in C# and .NET before, working on Blazor?
To be completely honest, I have not. I had experience with other kinds of web development, but this was my first dive into .NET and Blazor, and it was amazing. I enjoyed it a lot. I learned a ton, and I'm much more excited about web development now than I was 3 months ago. So this was really a eye-opening experience.
So were you mostly coming from like a JavaScript or TypeScript background? Was that your primary language development experience? Okay, and then came to Blazor. Cool. All right.
That's
Yeah,
right.
good. And it sounds like that was a positive experience, not a.
It was great,
That's good.
amazing. Yeah.
You never go back, Roland. Like once you try C# and .NET, like it's hard to go back. All right, cool, excellent. All right, so Roland, thank you for sharing that. That was great work. We've really enjoyed having you here on the team this summer. We hope to be seeing much more of you in the .NET community, in the ecosystem, and maybe even working on Blazor in the future. We have our second honorary intern or intern alumnus, I guess, Javier.
Intern alumni, yes.
Who's also been working on his internship project this summer, I guess. Do you have some new stuff, Javier, that you also want to show us?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been talking for a while about, or one of the themes that have been part of this release has been like improvements to the state persistence story. We did the declarative model for persistent component state. We did the support for pausing and resuming circuits. And one of the other legs that we had in this story that was not complete when we did .NET 8 was around enhanced navigation. So during enhanced navigation, you would get state updates the first time the runtime started. So when you started Blazor server or when you started Blazor WebAssembly, you would get the state at that time. But then during any further enhanced navigation, if the runtime was already running, we would not give you any state updates. And there was a reason for that, which is at the time, we realized that it was going to be more complex to do this with enhanced navigation. The reason for it is because up until now, all the state always moved from a static rendering into an interactive render mode. Okay, but the interactive render mode was starting right after we persisted the state. So that meant that there was no chance for you to have some local state on your app that you could change, and that could get into conflict with your local state, with your local interactive state. So if we put this in terms of scenario, what does that mean? So imagine that you are, for example, on a page that uses enhanced navigation, and you have a form on your page. And your customer is happily editing the form. If for some reason you trigger an enhanced navigation, what do we do with the state? Do we override it, or do we keep the one that that you have? And that's not a decision that we can make for you. And this is a very common problem with regards to data. So what we have done as part of this journey is improve the story so that we can give you the choice to choose when to restore, and also to allow you to opt in into receiving updates. So I'm going to go with the code here, and let me
so we can see. There you go.
Yes. So I have a weather forecast, and if I show you the routes, this is, and I show you up, this is per page navigation. You can see there's no like render mode here in the routes. So we have our weather forecast, but tweaked a bit to receive a page. And then within this page, we have the persistent state, and then we have these allow updates. So if I go ahead and run the app here.
So like you were saying, like this allow updates is a new concept, because before, state persistence would only basically get restored once, right? Like you pre-rendered some state and then you would load it and you were done. But with enhanced navigation, you might actually get like multiple state chunks of state that you have to decide. Well, do you want to load them all? Do you want to just load the first one? And so now you have these knobs to control what behavior makes sense for your application.
Exactly. And in fact, let's actually just do that to show the like current experience that you have. So if I click here, so if I go here, I'm gonna go to the like weather. So you saw the loading there, because that was an enhanced nav. And then if I click, you can see that like, hey, nothing gets updated.
So each of those clicks is actually doing an enhanced nav. It's not like a normal like event handler where you're like, you know, triggering like navigation manager whatever, right? Like you're literally browsing to the same URL, and Blazor's doing the static server-side rendering, which is intercepted by a fetch call instead of it being a full browser navigation. And you're getting state with that navigation, but you're by default you're not going to get it unless you say that you'd like it.
Exactly. So now that we have opted into allowing updates, I can go here and then I get the data. But then when I click next, you can see that like the data gets updated. And that's essentially data from the server that is being applied to this persistent state. So the interesting bit about this is that since all our data is coming from the server through this persistent state, we actually, first of all, we don't have to have anything to do an API call to get the data. In fact, if you see here, I print essentially a message saying, hey, the data came from the server. So your component can just receive parameters, and as long as those parameters are persistent state, then as long as the component stays on the page, it's just going to receive updates.
Very cool. So it just works with enhanced nav by default, but it'll only do it on like the first load. And then if you want future updates, you set allow updates to true, and then you can get updates on each subsequent enhanced nav for that interactive component if you want.
Exactly. So if you ever had the problem with pre-rendering and the UI flickering, you want to use persistent state. And if you are doing enhanced nav and you are reading data, as long as you are able to put the logic that you use to load the data within the URL. So in this case, if I go back to the weather here, you see that we use the page to do the navigation. As long as your like state is routable, you don't have to be writing APIs or writing anything to access that data, because just the act of navigating is gonna trigger a fetch request to the server. We're gonna gather all the data, and then we're just gonna give you the new state back.
Awesome. Looks great.
So the other thing that I wanted to show is the case where, like I was mentioning, this is not desirable, because you could say, well, why don't you do this all the time? So I did create another page that is a wizard form. So let me actually just like see if I can go here. So I have like a sign up form here, and I have like my personal details, and I have like a link here to go like back and forth. Okay, this is not like really how you would do a wizard, but it kind of gets the point across. So you can do like John Doe, and then when you hit back, you see that that the data is there. Okay, and like you can see that these are enhanced nav essentially because we are changing the URL. So in this case, essentially, when I hit back, I don't want the like state from that form to be overridden, essentially. And this is precisely the reason why we force you to opt in into this, because preserving the state is the safe approach. If we were to like turn this off or turn it on, let's say true. Just like this.
So here, your customer property, that state is basically holding the state of the form, which is actually something that the user is mutating, like is operating on, and so you want to be careful to lose that.
So you can see here that I have like the stage of the form, and this is somewhat simulating a wizard, and you can see that like there is like a link for like going back and forth essentially. So I run the app and I click here back to the app. And now if I go to my form, I can do the same thing. When I hit back now, the problem is that like the data is gone because it was overridden by the data that came as an enhanced navigation update. So as we never want you to lose your data or the data that like you like type really hard or spend a bunch of time like generating, that's why there is a default that is like you need to opt in into getting data in, and it's essentially a way of saying data from the server wins.
Makes sense. So don't do that, right? Like, this is the case where you're basically showing how the default makes sense. Like you wouldn't want the default to be allow updates always to true, because then you might have cases where you actually lose data. It's a behavior that you need to get into when you know data you want to be reloaded every single time you do that enhanced nav.
Exactly. If you are only reading the data, then absolutely do allow updates. Nothing is going to happen because you are only reading the data. So you always want the freshest data that the server can give you. But if you are allowing the user to modify that state in the interactive component, you don't want the server to suddenly override that state.
You know, there's an interesting question coming from the chat that I'll bring up about you know, the additional concept counts, you know, complexity that's happening in not just in Blazor, honestly, but in web frameworks in general. You know, auto is for people who aren't familiar with auto, that's a render mode that Blazor has that kind of does both WebAssembly and server. Like it'll start out with the Blazor server style rendering and then download the WebAssembly runtime in the background and then switch to WebAssembly once it's available and cached. And that brings some complexity. Like you now have to think about with your components, are they running on the server? Are they running on the client? Now we have these state persistence features, you know, where we're trying to give you ways that you can optimize how state is handled in your app. So you're not like fetching the same state twice and avoiding certain UX experiences that are suboptimal where things, you know, flicker as they transition between static pre-rendered state to an interactive state. And this adds more concepts, adds more complexity. Javier, are things just getting too complex? Like how do you think about this issue?
Yeah. So I think part of the challenge here is the way we present all these options. The way I think about Blazor is in general in kind of like three scenarios, sort of speak. The equivalent of the old Blazor server, where you do full interactivity. And that is the simplest one, to be honest.
Blazor server, full interactive, because you're already on the server, you get all the interactive features. Super simple.
Exactly.
I guess some trade-offs in terms of like, you're using server resources and the connections and such. Like,
yeah, but I would, if I had to choose, I would always go with like the Blazor server option first, unless proven otherwise, because it's the simplest. Then you can think that when you introduce code running on the browser, like with WebAssembly, it's kind of similar, okay? Is if you do the all WebAssembly hosted, or just do Blazor server full interactivity with WebAssembly, it's the exact same model. The only difference that is there is pre-rendering. That it was off in the previous model and it's on by default now, but you can turn it off also. That at the time that you introduce, for example, something like WebAssembly, then well, now you need to have like an API, you need to have an extra endpoint, a security, HTTP client, although code, you need to decide like where your code lives. You need to create abstractions for some things. You can choose not to like do WebAssembly. If server works for you, then don't introduce that extra complexity. Then at the same time, there are reasons to introduce that extra complexity. You want to be able to run offline. You want to be able to run in context where you don't have a stable, reliable connection, those types of things. Finally, there are many cases where with Blazor applications, you need to make a trade-off between you need a reliable connection or you need to download a non-trivial amount of like bytes over the wire, which is the .NET runtime plus all the DLLs. Auto is a way of allowing you to have the somewhat like best of both worlds, but at the same time, it gives you the worst of both worlds, which is you need to like handle the complexity of WebAssembly and you need to handle the complexity of server. Now, with all that said, I think that's not different from Blazor than it is for any other or for many of the other frameworks around, especially all the ones that are doing like things server side. They have the same problems that we have. They have the same learning curve. The concepts are strikingly similar from one framework to the other. And there is a learning curve that goes with like all these things. But at the end of the day, I think we are all trying to, one, reduce the amount of like concepts and things that you need to learn. I think one of our goals for 8 and onwards is that we want to have like a single way in which you can write a piece of code that works for like one or the two modes. As I said, if you are happy with like the old Blazor server model, you can do the same thing with Blazor Web, full interactivity server. The challenge that I think that like we receive feedback a lot is that like if you go to the template now, there are like lots of options, and it's not super clear for people that it's like, hey, all Blazor server is there, all Blazor WebAssembly hosted is there, just without the pre-rendering, which you can like turn off. And there is auto mode for you to like be able to manage the best of both worlds. And for many cases, you don't have to have a SPA, which is the other thing that like Blazor on .NET 8 was about, which is it's fine to have a server rendered up. Like in fact, the majority of apps out there don't need client-side routing, don't need the level of interactivity that like you get with a SPA framework at the cost at which you get it. So that's why we had like a more lightweight mode, and it's up to you to choose whether that makes sense for you or not. And I think that like, as you can see from the like 5 minutes that it took me to explain this, there is quite a good amount of choice. And where I think we could do a bit better is in explaining those 3 main scenarios, which are like, hey, here's your like server interactivity, here's your WebAssembly interactivity. You can do auto, but you pay the cost of both to get the benefit of both. And you can do enhanced nav to get island architectures, which is what it's called, which is do mostly server, server-side render and only require interactivity when you really are going to benefit from it.
Yeah, so making it a sort of pay-for-play type of model where you start simple, and then as you need optimizations, as you need features, as you need capabilities to make your app applicable to the scenarios that you care about, being able to address the types of audiences that you care about, then the more complex things come in as you need that functionality. I think you're right that some people probably jump in a little too early, maybe on some of these features where they don't actually need the additional complexity. Like auto, I think is a great example. Most apps probably don't need auto, and so we would probably recommend don't start with auto. Start at the simpler models, like start with a Blazor web app with just a little bit of server interactivity, and then you adopt other render modes and other patterns as they become appropriate, and that helps you avoid some of the complexity. As framework developers, we want to make the features available. We want to make the choices available to you, so you have the capabilities available to actually accomplish the scenarios that you need to. I think the trick for us also then is to guide people to only use those features when appropriate. Like to start simple, do only what you need, and then start adding complexity as it's appropriate. All right, cool. That makes sense. Well, that's great. So that the new enhanced nav with state persistence, that's in .NET 10 RC1, which hopefully is almost out. Just checking to see the blogs. Anything up yet? Not quite yet, but should be out, like we said, very, very, very soon. We do have a few questions. You guys up for a few questions?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Some of them are related. Some of them are, just people asking general Blazor questions, which is totally fine. I think I'll just go through them in order. Someone was asking about how do you load a dynamic form generation from JSON file in Blazor. So I'm guessing this was maybe motivated a little bit, Roland, by the demo you showed where you're dynamically loading an image. In this case, I'm guessing they want to dynamically generate a form based off of some data format, like maybe something in a database of that nature. I don't know. Does anyone want to take that? I assume what you would do is you would
I can take it if you want, but that's essentially what the Razor compiler does. So it turns some like C# into or some markup into like a form. So it's essentially writing a compiler and interpreter.
I mean, I'm guessing though that they probably want to do it dynamically at runtime. Like they have, imagine you have a database with a form definition that someone went into an editor and defined, and then you want to be able to show that form in a Blazor app. You would use Razor logic to say, like, we'll load it in the JSON data and then create form components based on the structure of the JSON data that you defined.
Exactly. So it's an interpreter essentially of the JSON.
Cool. All right. So hopefully that helps with that one. Next one. It would be better if you added a full screen viewing mode and a zoom for viewing images. This is in order not to use third-party libraries, I assume for those capabilities. Or you can recommend good libraries for viewing images that are already maybe doing this functionality. So I guess this sounds like a feature request, like, hey, in addition to being able to load images dynamically, it'd be awesome if Blazor gave you a really convenient API for full screen mode, for being able to zoom in on images. Those are reasonable suggestions. Go ahead and open GitHub issues in our repo to suggest those. There's a general, I think, theme of things that browsers can do that Blazor could ideally surface in a more first-class way through C#, through .NET APIs that maybe today you have to handle through JavaScript interop. You always have the JavaScript interop out. Like if you need to do these things, you can always go out into JavaScript and do whatever you could do in JavaScript in your Blazor app. Roland obviously wrote some of that code for you to help you load images dynamically. Similarly for zooming and doing full screen. I'm guessing there are probably some community libraries out there that enable that functionality. I don't know any off the top of my head, but if someone in the chat knows one, feel free to recommend. If not, that's an opportunity to build one. Whether it should be in the framework itself is something we can, of course, consider. Let us know what you think on GitHub. Anything else to add on that one, Javier or Roland?
No, I think it's fine. It's the type of thing that I would be kind of worried about adding to the framework because it sounds like very specific functionality. But sometimes these things come in the form of a sample. Yeah. One of the things that I do a lot these days, honestly, is have chats with Copilot about all these things. how do I do this? How do I do that? 90% of the time,
JavaScript interrupt code for you.
yeah, it just gives me the answer or like the API that I need to use. And like, yeah, it lowers the barrier of entry to all these things like an order of magnitude.
Cool. Next question is about hot reload. And are there any improvements? Because they're ready to start the party in Nigeria as soon as hot reload gets better. I mean, first thing I would say is that we have heard loud and clear the feedback about hot reload. We know that hot reload has a number of issues that need improvement, whether it's performance, the reliability of the hot reload tooling, and the set of edit types that it supports, expanding those so that more things can be hot reloaded into the runtime. We are absolutely working on this and focused on delivering improvements for this. You may have just recently, actually, let me show this in my screen. Let me share my screen real quick. Wasn't quite set up.
I think we did a bunch of fixes to in the runtime actually for hot reload, because one of the aspects that we need to handle as a framework author is reloading caches and things like that. So yeah, we've been working all across the stack to make the experience better.
You may have just noticed on the Visual Studio blog that the latest version of Visual Studio is now available as an insider edition. This is the replacement, I think, for the old preview channel. It's now the insiders channel. So Visual Studio 2026 has now officially been announced. A lot of our hot reload improvements that we're doing are in Visual Studio itself as a tool to make hot reload faster, more reliable. And then, of course, across the .NET SDK and the Blazor framework itself, hot reload actually touches pretty much every piece of the stack. So to make it better, we have a lot of teams that are collaborating on this, the Razor compiler team, the Razor tooling team. But in Visual Studio, there's a bunch of improvements that we're specifically working on. There's an option when you install the Visual Studio 2026 Insiders Edition, there's an option to enable what's called Razor co-hosting, which I encourage you to try if you're installing this latest build. That will co-host the Razor language server with the Roslyn C# language server, which makes hot reload much, much faster. We're seeing some really dramatic performance improvements when you're doing Razor-based hot reload on large like Blazor or MVC projects. So give that a try. That should be getting better. We have even more performance improvements that we're expecting to do for this Visual Studio release. So yeah, get this latest Visual Studio version, start trying it out, turn on co-hosting and give that a try. Send us feedback and let us know how well it's working for you. There are also a bunch of new edit types that are supported in this latest .NET 10 version. So more edits that you make should now be supported when you try to hot reload them without having to restart the app. So exciting times for hot reload. Definitely working on that. All right. Is it possible to use Blazor WASM standalone with Maui hybrid? I'll take this one. I would say the answer is yes, but why would you want to? So this is actually a point of confusion that I think a lot of people have with, it's actually, we call it Blazor hybrid, like when it's hosted in a .NET Maui app. The Blazor hybrid pattern basically is to take your Blazor code, run it in a native client application like a .NET Maui app, although we also support like WPF applications and Windows Forms applications, and then you render those components to an embedded web view control. So the thing that's unique about this model, and that's different than Blazor WebAssembly, is that your Blazor code is running on a normal native .NET runtime. It's not running on WebAssembly in that browser web view control. It's running on a normal .NET runtime with JIT and all the full access to that native platform that you would expect when running .NET code. So it's faster usually. You have access to more functionality than what the browser sandbox would normally allow you to have access to. So if you were trying to write a rich client native app using Blazor, that's the model that I would recommend. Could you host a Blazor WebAssembly app in that web view control? Yeah, I mean, it's a browser that would work, but it will probably be not as fast, and you won't be able to do as many things to like punch out of the browser sandbox like you would naturally be able to do if you did just a normal Blazor hybrid app. So yeah, I guess I would say you could, but that's probably not what you want. You probably just want to build a normal Blazor hybrid app using .NET Maui is my suggestion. All right, that's that one. Oh, whoops. Next one. I remember using persistent state but it was difficult when using just simple primitive types like an integer. Is that fixed? So I don't need to bucket them
Yes,
in
that
complex
is
objects
fixed.
anymore.
That is fixed. It was reported and it was fixed.
It is reported and fixed. Do you know which release it went to? Is that .NET 10 fix?
Yeah, definitely. I think previous 6 or previous 7, even earlier.
So it should be addressed in .NET 10. Give it a try.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, that was easy. The complexity, we already talked about auto. Yes, auto is more complex, so we recommend don't use it unless you really need that like load time performance benefit. You start with the simplest thing that works for your scenario. Is it possible to do Blazor server template that uses fetch rather than SignalR? This is a great talk. We've been kind of similar to what we've been talking about for maybe .NET V Next, Javier.
Not exactly that same thing, but what this is essentially is some sort of like HTMX hybrid, I would imagine. So for all the fans of complexity, this would be yet another like render mode that we would need to like figure out how to work with and how to work through. So we are thinking of ways in which we improve enhanced nav, but like we don't have concrete plans in this area.
I think sometimes people, when they ask this question, they're thinking like, well, Blazor server requires this persistent connection. Do you really need that? What if you just did a bunch of fetch requests instead? And I think what that really gets to is, well, do you want the Blazor server stateful programming model or not? If you enjoy all the benefits that come from Blazor server being stateful, where like you have the user's circuit is what we usually call the associated state with a connected user in Blazor server. And you can like have events that operate on that state. And it's just very convenient to operate in that stateful way. If you like that programming model, then there's not much benefit, I think, in like swapping out the SignalR connection, the WebSocket connection with a bunch of fetch requests. So if you're going to swap it out for fetch requests, then you're going to need to somehow maintain that state across all those requests. Now, if you're instead saying, I'd like just a stateless programming model, well, then I would point you probably to our static server-side rendering support, which is what effectively that does. And with enhanced navigation, which does use fetch to streamline the updates. Javier, you were going to say something?
Yes, the other thing that I was going to say is actually that with .NET 10 allowing you to pause and resume the circuit, you can essentially choose to disconnect the circuit on inactivity, and essentially you get the like full connection where you are when your user is interacting, and you can throttle that connection if the user is not interacting. The benefit of a model that uses fetch over like a WebSocket, if your goal is to have a stateful model, it's not going to be very relevant because both are going to be HTTP2 connections and they're going to be like essentially kind of the same. Don't tell that to any network expert, but they're going to be kind of the same. The main difference between like server-side rendering and Blazor server is the stateless model or the stateful model. And there are other ways that you can have to like maintain state on the server if you want. Nothing is precluding you from using session in a server render app.
Thank you, Javier. And I think I got one more here that I had started, and there's lots more in the chat. I'm sorry if we're not going to get to everyone's questions. We can, of course, take the chat to either the Discord or to GitHub for things that we don't get to. Julian asked, the WASM template has pre-rendering. Okay, it's simple to disable, but the template is missing an API call to the server in that template. So this is less a question, more of a comment, and that is true. It doesn't have an API call anymore in the weather page. Now the thing to really realize there is like, so we used to have an API call in that template, and it would demonstrate like how do you make a client call to the server, like particularly if you're doing like Blazor WebAssembly for the client and you need to somehow access the server. The weather page is kind of honestly, it's not a great use case for that pattern. Like you have some data that you're getting from server side, and then you just want to display it. And there's no like interactivity on that page. And so what we did is in .NET 8 we switched that page to be a demonstration of streaming rendering, where you're requesting some data. Like in this case, it was weather forecast data that might be coming from your database or it might be coming from some third-party service, and then you need to display ideally some content while you're waiting to get that data to load, and then you display the actual data and you're done, which is actually a great use case for just static server-side rendering with streaming rendering. So that's why we stopped doing that. And I know some people have come back and said, but it was really convenient as maybe as a teaching tool to just show how do you set up the HTTP client, and also just to have the HTTP client code set up for you. We hear that, and we do have some issues on GitHub about potentially adding something back along in that vein. But I don't think we want to do it just sort of naively with the existing weather page, because it's not honestly the right way to render the weather page. The best way to render that weather page is get the data and get the HTML down to the browser as fast as possible. So that's kind of where we're at with that. We'll certainly be discussing more with the community ways that we can make it easier for people who do need to do API calls from their Blazor WebAssembly clients, how to more conveniently set that up. Okay, I think that is pretty much it for time. I'm just gonna check one more time, see if the .NET releases, is it live? It doesn't look like it's quite live yet. I see some of the servicing releases going out, but keep refreshing the .NET blog. Check the .NET blog, check the .NET homepage to looking for those latest .NET bits. The Visual Studio 2026 announcement is out. You should use that version of Visual Studio with .NET 10 now, so make sure you install that latest version of Visual Studio, the Visual Studio Insiders Edition. Roland, thank you so much for being with us today and showing off your great work. Javier, thank you for being also our second honorary intern for the Blazor Community Stand-Up. We will be back next week to talk more about what's happening in ASP.NET Core. Thank you, everyone, for attending. And with that, happy coding.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for having me.